This video is part 5 of our real-world class demonstration. In the previous video, we set up a unit test project and renamed the class and test method, and now we are ready to start coding in some tests for our hardware store example. As noted in the previous video, a reference to the hardware store example project, which is stored in the same solution, has already been made. We also need to come up and add a using statement for the hardware store example project. In the test method test get invoice amount, we will need to set up an invoice object and provide it with the values needed for the constructor. You can provide any values that you want to test. I'm going to use the same values that we used in the previous test inside of the main. Remember that we can use asserts to run our test and get a true or false response on whether or not we were receiving the correct answer. So we can do an assert r equal against the value that we expect. Since we're passing 1595 and a quantity of 2, we expect the value 3190 as a decimal. After the comma, we use our invoice object and the getInvoiceAmount method. If the getInvoiceAmount method is returning 3190, when we run our test, this test will pass. Now we can check the test over in the Test Explorer. We can see that our first test method is available. If you haven't built your project at this time, go ahead and build and make sure that you don't have any errors before you come into the Test Explorer. You can then run your test, and here we can see that it passes. So you could set up methods that test for various values passed in to the invoice class and then test the getInvoiceAmount to be sure that your class's methods are returning the proper values. You can also test that your properties are returning the proper values by setting up a separate method and then running an assert to be sure that the property value matches the expected value. Here, this test method, testPartNumber property, creates the same invoice object, passing in 1234 for the part number, and then uses an assert to check that the value held in the part number is in fact 1234. So you can run this test to check and see if the properties are being set. We can also run tests to be sure that our set accessors for values such as quantity and price are in fact giving us the correct values. So in the test price property, the assert using the r equal, just like we've previously used, is checking for a 0 value in the price property. And since our constructor is passing over a negative price, we should get a 0 value, since we've told the set accessor not to set a value that's not greater than or equal to 0. So once you've got that test set up, you can come over to your Test Explorer and run, and you can see that the test is passing. We're getting a default value of 0 inside of the price since the negative value is not being set. So hopefully this gives you an overview of how to use what you've learned about classes and starting to implement this idea of unit testing to ensure that your classes are working properly before you start implementing further code on top of them.